There, you're welcome to my channel. In today's video lesson, I want us to take a look at the poll tax ordinance of 1852, and basically we are going to take a look at the introduction to the poll tax and also the resistance to the poll tax, why some people refuse to pay, and then we shall also take a look at the reasons for the failure of the poll tax ordinance of 1852. So these three subtopics are going to be what we are going to base on. But before we even begin or go into our lesson, I would like to remind you to subscribe to our channel if you are new, and if you have already subscribed to, we thank you very much for your support. In our previous videos, we have looked at the Fanti Confederation, the achievement, the reasons, and the failures of the Confederation. We've also looked at some couple of topics that you may be interested in, so you can check in our playlist or on our channel, and you will get access to these videos. So now let's dive into our lesson for today. Let's go and take a look at our lesson objectives for today. So our first lesson objectives for today is very simple. It's for us to be able to discuss the reasons for the failure of the poll tax ordinance of 1852, why the poll tax ordinance failed, why people refused to pay. So the failure here means that people refused to pay the amount of money that was estimated, did not materialize. I mean, authorities could not get that amount of money. So why did it fail? And that is going to be our major objectives as we move on in our lesson. So let's begin with our introduction and find out what the poll tax ordinance was all about. Now, the poll tax ordinance of 1852 was a colonial ordinance that introduced a tax system whereby every man, every woman, children who lived within the area, okay, under the British jurisdiction, was required to pay 1 shilling per head per year. Now, an ordinance simply means a law passed by a local city, so like Kumasi or the metropolitan passes a law that affects only Kumasi, that becomes an ordinance, all right? So this was, let's say, a law which prescribed that every man, every woman, and children who lived under the British jurisdiction was required to pay 1 shilling per head per year. And this was a form of tax or taxation. And we all know the importance of tax in the development of a country. And therefore, it was very important that the people at that time paid these taxes. Now, 1 shilling per head. So if maybe, for instance, in a family of, say, the father, the mother, and 3 children, which what that means is that the father will pay, the mother will pay, the 3 children, each of them will also pay 1 shilling. So if they are 5, I'm sure they will pay, within the year, they will pay 5 shilling. And this was the nature of the tax or the poll tax ordinance of 1852. Now, this tax was introduced by the governor at that time, Major Stephen Hill. He was then the governor of the Gold Coast, and he introduced these taxes. Now, the reason for the introduction of the tax was that money was needed to pay for the administrative expenses of the territory. So why did it become necessary for the British to now introduce tax or tax the people? This was necessary because of administrative expenses. Now, bear in mind that the poll tax ordinance did not affect Asante, and that is why in the definition we said that the poll tax ordinance affected areas under the British jurisdiction, and Asante at this period was not under the British jurisdiction, and therefore the poll tax ordinance did not affect Asante, okay, but only the southern state or the Fanti states. And the reason was simple. The British needed money to run, the Gold Coast, administrative expenses, and that occasion the need for the tax. Now let's take a look at more about the tax. So in 1850, the Gold Coast was separated from Sierra Leone, and the acquisition of Danish fort, which was also located at Christiansborg, Tishi, Ningo, Adan, and Keta, all increased the British administrative expenses. Now, it is interesting to know that before or prior to 1850, the Gold Coast was part of Sierra Leone. So the governor in Sierra Leone also ran the Gold Coast. So they were all run as one colony. Now, however, in 1850, the Gold Coast was separated from Sierra Leone, which then means that the Gold Coast were now going to have their own governor, and then some civil servants who were going to work in the colonial administration, and therefore money was needed. Again, the British also acquired Danish forts, and these were located at these areas: Christiansborg, Tishiningo, and Co. And all these factors coming together increased administrative expenses of the British in the Gold Coast, and therefore they needed money to actually embark on all these administrative expenses. Also, the coastal dwellers, the Fanti states, were also demanding for good roads, schools, and hospitals from the British. Okay, so the coastal dwellers were also demanding for these social amenities. Now, these demands clearly brought a great financial burden on the British, and they had to find ways and means to get money to actually embark on these administrative, and then also the construction of these social amenities for the Fanti states. And these were some of the reasons that occasioned for the introduction of the poll tax ordinance. Now, due to these reasons, Major Stephen Hill met the Fanti chiefs in Cape Coast in April 1852 to discuss the poll tax that was proposed. After these meetings, the chiefs accepted to pay the tax. So the governor at that time, Major Stephen Hill, he met the chiefs, the Fanti chiefs in Cape Coast, and he proposed a tax to them that this is what we want to do. And I think the chiefs, upon consultation, not even consultation, the chiefs actually accepted to pay the poll tax, or the tax, there with Major Stephen Hill. So that is how come the poll tax came about. This was the reason behind it. And I think it makes sense, because every government needs tax, to develop the country. Ghana, for instance, we have had a lot of tax introduced to us, and we will talk about one of them. The most famous was the e-levy, and the e-levy too, the government could not, of course, realize the money that he needed. But let's pause on the e-levy. We shall come back. Let's take a look at the amount of money that was expected by the government, or the British government. Now, it was expected that about £20,000 would be realized within a year after the introduction of the poll tax. So every year, or at the end of the year, the British were actually expecting to get £20,000. However, in the first year, they only realized £7,567. And then even this amount even dwindled. Okay, it fell steadily to €1,500 by 1861. That is almost 9 years or 10 years after the introduction of the bill. So you realize that the initial amount of money which was estimated to be realized did not materialize. Moreover, as the years also progresses, the amount of money they were getting also decreased. And that was a worry, it caused for a worry among the British, because the people refused to pay the tax. And this is not different from, as I was saying, the e-levy. the government projected to get more like 60 million or so cedis. I stand to be corrected though. But at the end of the day, at the end of the year, the government, did not get that amount of money, and they themselves came out to say that the people were not paying the e-levy, and so they couldn't realize the amount of money that they needed, and so they had to introduce or reintroduce other taxes. So let's go into the reasons why the people refuse to pay the taxes. Then we can compare with our current situation if these were the same reasons why Ghanaians refuse to pay the e-levy. But before we even go into the reasons why people fail to pay the poll tax, let's take a look at some examples of resistance to the poll tax. Now, the Gold Coasters refused to pay the tax. They did not only refuse to pay by giving out their money, but they also embarked on several demonstrations, to register their displeasure for the tax. So people began to pay the poll tax as part of the general. People began to pay the poll tax as part of the general resistance, refused to the growth of British power and jurisdiction. Now, this resistance developed into open rebellion. At first, in the Eastern District, in January 1854, the chiefs and the people held protest meetings in Accra and refused to pay the tax. Again, several thousands of armed men from Accra and all over the coastal villages between Accra and the Volta also marched on to the fort at Accra to also register their displeasure. Now, the route was stopped and the people were fined 250 euros. But in September, the people of Achim, Equiapem, and Krobo also staged even a more violent, route. And then let's take a look at more of them. The chiefs and the elders of these states swore that they would never pay the tax again. Soldiers who tried to collect the taxes in some cases were, attacked. The government bombarded Labadi, Teshi, and the Christianborg. Many houses were destroyed and personal belongings were damaged, but the routes were renewed later. Now, these were some of the resistance to the poll tax ordinance, how people resisted the poll tax ordinance. I think that in the case of e-levy, people did not resist in the form of demonstration. I think now Ghanaians have become very calm and quiet about some of these things. But let's dive into the reasons why the people refused to pay the poll tax ordinance. Now, the first one was that the people refused to pay the tax on the grounds that it was anti-customary. Okay, thus the chiefs had agreed to the imposition of the tax without prior consultation with the people. You recall that Major Stephen Hill met the chiefs in Cape Coast, and the chiefs agreed without consulting their subjects. And this, to the people, is what anti-customary. Why? Because in our traditional political system, chiefs don't take decisions on behalf of the people. You have your council of elders, you consult the people. So there was true democracy in our traditional system. And so for chiefs to just accept the tax or to pay the tax and just impose it on their subjects, of course the subjects were not interested. They did not want to pay because they were not consulted. And this is not also different from the issue of the e-levy. You know that Parliament actually passed the e-levy, but the people, they didn't like the idea of taxation. And I think if they had maybe conducted a referendum, a lot of people would have would have voted against the e-levy. But here we have Parliament approved the tax, and then the people refused to pay. And this is a lesson that our leaders should learn from, because you can't force people to do what they don't want to do. In the decision process, you must include them. in as much as we say that Parliament represents the people, in actual sense, Parliament in Ghana, for instance, it represents the majority in power if it is that party which is in power. Parliament represents that party, not the people. And so this is why, even though we say that Parliament represents the people, which then means that every law made by Parliament should be supported or was made by the people. In most instances, it turns out to be the opposite. The people do not like it, but Parliament likes it. So, how can you just tell me that they represent us? So it is something that our leaders should take a clue of. And indeed, the e-levy failed because people were not consulted, like the poll tax in 1852. Now, the next one was that the people also opposed the tax because the tax was collected by officials appointed by the British instead of the representatives of the chiefs. So at this time, the people, or the Gold Coasters, or the Fantis, still felt that the British were like foreigners, and so you cannot be taking money from me if you are a foreigner. So they preferred that their people that are chosen by their chiefs should be the ones to collect the taxes and not the foreigners. The next, of course, reason also had to do with the collectors of the tax were not actually honest. The proceeds were often pocketed. So the people also, or the Fantis also sense that those who were, the tax collected, a lot of them pocketed the money, and so that was also a reason. The next one also had to do with the people also realized that when a part of the money was used to pay the salaries of public servants instead of using the money for its purpose of providing social amenities which was promised them. You recall that one of the reasons for the introduction of the tax was that the Fanti states actually they wanted social amenities like roads, schools, and other things, but they realized that these things were not forthcoming. They were paying, those who were paying were expecting that these things should come, but they were not forthcoming. And that also encouraged a lot of people not to pay tax, and to pay the poll tax. And this is also quite, similar to the reasons why some Ghanaians, invade tax, mostly because they don't see the importance of these taxes. Of course, what they are taxed for, we don't see it. I remember e-levy. There were a whole lot of town meetings about it. We would use it to build roads. We use it to build. We will come out to tell you every year our process and all of that, and none of them is happening. People are paying. Yes, some are paying, but no project has come out for us that this is a e-levy project or anything of that sort. So these were some of the reasons why people refuse to pay the poll tax, and I think the leaders should also be forthcoming with their taxes, because everything we do in this country seems to be loan, and so then what is our tax doing? Also, the chiefs had no say either in its collection or in its expenditure. So the collection, we have already indicated that the chiefs were not allowed to choose their representative, right? Again, in their expenditure, the chiefs also had no say in the expenditure of the of the monies collected, and the people felt that their chiefs were their leaders, so why shouldn't they have a say in their expenditure? Now the last one, the people refused to pay the tax because they saw it as an attempt by the British to establish political power over them, and this is something that a lot of people naturally would oppose, because I can't be in my house and then you come all the way from the sea to just come and ask me to pay any amount of money. And so I think naturally our natural instinct would not be interested in paying this tax. Good. So I think you have learned something from today's lesson. This is a dry work and uptake a question in 2014. You can try your hands on that. Thank you very much for your time and support. Do not forget to subscribe and share to your friends who may be interested. Have a nice day. Bye bye.